Thank you so much for joining. Let's just take a moment again to resettle our motivation and really think about the heartfelt motivation. And I have some notes in one of my prayer books that I do every morning. And it's an old um, notes about Rinpoche saying that even at the beginning of the Lama Chopa, if you happen to, some people do that every day, that there's this bodhicitta couple of paragraphs, but it's really, he said, think of all the suffering sentient beings. So we say these prayers, but we really don't, we just blah, 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 right? We don't really have the feeling of, wait a minute, bodhicitta. And so I really take a moment at that paragraph and really reflect where, and he said it's heartfelt, like you feel the urgency to get enlightened. Like we're doing fine, but there's a lot of people not doing well. And we are here for them. Like, thank God for our Dharma centers like Tutu and our practice and the basically the guidance from a being like Lama Zopa Rinpoche is extraordinary. To connect with that in one life is extraordinary. So if I can just take a moment and really think about, it's not pleasant, I know, but think about the suffering of these beings, right? And feel the urgency. I really want to help. I think all of you want to help. We all, that's why we're here. But really feel it in your heart where if I could become a Buddha, I would be unlimited in helping them. I would know exactly the perfect thing at any given moment. So let that motivate our practice. So take a moment, let that sink into your heart. And get the feeling, I need to do this quickly. I need to progress along this path quickly. Why? For all of these beings. And so it's really for that motivation, that point, to benefit all living beings, all mother sentient beings, is why we're going to get together today and talk about bringing more joy into our lives. Thank you. So what I'd like to do is go back a little bit to forgiveness. We were on the 5th pillar of joy, and we're going to finish the last 3, which we've been talking a bit about anyway, those last 3 to some degree, some of them. But I found my notes on forgiveness. They were right in front of my face last week when I couldn't find them, from the Book of Forgiving. And this is the book by Archbishop Desmond Tutu and his daughter that I highly recommend if forgiveness is an issue for you, where you've been for years holding on to something. If you feel like you're someone who holds grudges and that people have wronged you, and there's a sense, some people really have a sense of what I would call victimhood. They see themselves always as a victim, that these things are always happening to them, and it further identifies them. And I don't personally find that a really healthy place to hang out. And it does prevent you, if you check in your mind, it really prevents you from being whole in a way to really be able to help others, because you're always kind of looking at your limitations and what everybody's done to you, like that. So there's always a distrust and a subtle paranoia at times at people. What do they want? What are they in it for? And negativity. So I find this Book of Forgiving has some very helpful exercises, very helpful exercises. And again, we have been through perspective. These are the pillars: perspective, humility, humor, and acceptance. The first 4 pillars related to your mind. And now we're in forgiveness, the first of the 4 pillars related to the opening of the heart, forgiveness. And I want to talk about, from Archbishop Desmond Tutu and his daughter, the 4, it's basically called the Fourfold Path of Forgiveness. This is something he introduces in the book. Again, there's many books on forgiveness, and they all have their own methodologies. This is the Fourfold Path that he talks about. And I mentioned this briefly last time. Number one, telling the story. And again, this was a process that he developed that was aided by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that operated after apartheid fell in the Republic of South Africa. The way the country managed to do some healing. It's far from perfect in South Africa, but they made it through. And I visited South Africa some years ago with Kirti Senchab Rinpoche, this great Lama. We passed through there for about 10 days. And I've had some friends that lived there for many years that explained to me what was going on, Black people, white people. So the white people felt when apartheid fell, the big fear was there would be utter retaliation from the Blacks who had been tortured, imprisoned, slaughtered, like that. And they were terrified. You know, some were leaving the country thinking there would just be complete anarchy. And then with Nelson Mandela stepping in as their president, and him really pushing with different people on both sides, this Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as you know, arose where, and part of it was telling the story. So meaning the tortured, most of whom were Black, the Black South Africans, got to tell their story of their suffering, of their family's suffering, of the killings they endured, of their loved ones, the torture, to the torturers. And some of them were directly the torturers, the people that harmed them. So telling the story is really essential. And you may not have the abuser anymore to tell the story directly to. So this is the case, you were abused as a child, you were abused as an adult, somebody severely wronged you in life. You can tell the story even if the person has passed away. So this is a way Archbishop Desmond Tutu talks about getting your dignity back, okay, after you've been harmed. Okay, it's how you begin to take back what was taken from you. Okay, and again, if the person's already passed away, the abuser, you visualize them across and you tell the story to them. And you might want to tell the story with people that are active listeners, safe audience around you, a close friend, someone who was abused with you, somebody, you know, like it's okay as long as the story is heard, and you might want to mention the story a few times, not for the rest of your life over and over. You eventually want to release yourself, but telling the story is the first step on that fourfold path. Very important. Again, if somebody's telling you their story, this is the time to practice active listening, to be a compassionate wall for them to talk with, a compassionate listener. So you're not, if you're the listener, you're not questioning the facts, right? You're not cross-examining them. You're not debating them. You're creating simply a safe space, and you're acknowledging what happened to them. You're empathizing with the pain. So in his book, he's got something called the forgivenessproject.com. There's lots of the forgivenessfoundation.org, Project Forgive. I mean, there's many websites about forgiveness you can search if that's one of the things that you're. And then when you're telling your story, you obviously speak the truth. This isn't about exaggeration. Just deal with the facts methodically. This is what happened. See as closely as you can keep it to the truth of what really happened. And you may want to practice by telling the story. Let's say your abuser is still in existence, right? Practice telling your story first to a friend or a loved one, somebody you trust that can be that active, compassionate, empathetic listener. Rehearse it, it's okay. Okay, because it can be very scary to face the abuser if they're still alive. Okay. If you don't think you can be in front of them, when you actually want to tell this story to the abuser, you can write them a letter. Write them a letter again, but sticking to the facts, speaking the truth in the letter, you know, and here's a big part of it, accepting that whatever's happened, it can't be changed or undone. It's happened. It's happened. You can't change that fact. What you're changing is moving forward from this moment on. That. So the second step is naming the hurt. So you've told your story, just the facts, what actually happened, okay? In all of its pain and whatever, but it's the truth. It's not an exaggeration of the truth. Naming the hurt, okay? We're not responsible for what breaks us, okay? But we can be responsible for what puts us back together again. Okay? So naming the hurt is how we begin to repair our broken parts, like that. So, you know, how does it feel? How's it felt in your body and mind over these years? How did it feel initially, if you can remember, when the abuse was happening? You know, how does it feel now after many years? Like that. It could be a physical description that you have. I broke out in a rash. I shake every time, da 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 da. Right? It could be an emotional thing. I shut down, I close up. I can't watch any programs about child abuse. Or I hate all sexual predators. However you're feeling that, you know, rising up in your throat, name the hurt. Name the hurt. And then there's a third step, and we talked about this a bit last week. The third and fourth steps is, the third step is to practice the forgiving. You forgive. You really forgive them. You're, in a sense, you're emptying yourself of the hatred, of the thought of retaliation, of wanting to get them back, wanting them to suffer the way you did, hoping it happens to them. And you're releasing yourself from all of that. Okay, so I'm really choosing understanding, which first comes from acceptance. That's our previous pillar, acceptance. You know, and this is a hard one for people that have been severely abused in life. That abuser, I came to this big space with abusers that, because I really had issues with, I never could get my mind around sexual predators of children, child pornography, you know, these people that steal kids. And I just couldn't understand that. You know, I was like, what kind of mind is that? But a lot of them were sexually abused as kids. So for them, it's like, this is weird to say, a comfort zone. It's not comfortable, but it's a place that it's all they've known, some of them. So you tend to mimic how you were raised, what your comfort zones are, what you're familiar with, like that. So through that space, I started to accept that this could be the best they can do as the abuser. And you might say, it's not good at all. What do you mean best? Right? But they're showing up, they're completely fractured, and they were fractured as kids and never had any healing work done, never had any context of good health, good child rearing, whatever you want to say. They never stepped into that room, never were able to, perhaps. Too afraid, too fractured, too harmed, like that, to ever be able to be open to any help from anyone. Okay. So sometimes their abuse, that's the best they could do. That's it. Like that. And that's a hard one. But from my acceptance of that, then you could better forgive. Then you can find the space. Wow, they just have never even touched any help like that. And we all know, and we've heard about people like that, where, you know, you read something about some of these hardened criminals and how many people they killed and tortured, and you think, but that's all the life that they've ever known. That's what happened to them. So like, again, an animal, if you have a dog on a chain that's chained up its whole life, right? It has a limited way it can go in that area. I remember there was a dog at Laudo, one of my retreats, and the dog was chained, and it was a guard dog, and it barked a lot. But anytime you went by the cave, it lived in this little cave, but it had this chain, it would rush out to the end of the chain with its eyes all yellow, barking and like bearing, because it was scared, because it couldn't go if you stepped into its ring, it couldn't go anywhere. You know, it was terrified itself. That's where it came from, you know. And so I just felt like I had to walk by this dog to get to the kitchen, and I was in retreat strict retreat for some months. So they would deliver a couple meals to me during the day, but there were times I'd take walks and I had to go buy the dog. And then my heart went out to this dog, and I tried to talk to them about chaining, but that's what they do in that region. They just, and so I had this goal that I was going to be friends with this dog. I couldn't walk by and have it lunging and it would scare me. So I slowly, through food, I'd take a little bit from my lunch and kind of get closer and kind of throw a piece of a chapati, a little piece of bread slowly. And the dog would eat that and kind of look at me like, that's not bad. Slowly. And then eventually slowly was able to just enter the edge of its territory, but inside enough where it could get to me. And I would crouch down at its level and kind of look, not make eye contact. And it would come up and just smell me. And that's how we started. It would just smell me. Got used to, I was safe, and it was all mangy. The whole back was no fur, and it was just so sad. And I, slowly, and then started to give more food, and then I could go right into the territory, and I put oil on its back, and then the dog would see me and wag his tail, and we were friends like that. So again, those abusers are like the chained animal, terrified, not having any place to do with that terror, never having a healing aspect. So that's something we can choose to forgive, because think if you don't choose to forgive where you are. Think about how that sits in the heart, like a hard rock in the heart. And then the fourth step is you can choose to, as I mentioned last week, to renew the relationship, meaning you're willing to walk into a new place with the relationship and continue a relationship, not an abusive relationship anymore. You're getting healthy, but insisting, I will continue to have a relationship with you, and it has to be on healthy terms, which is going to be scary, a little scary in the beginning, because it's not expecting the other person, not expecting the abuser to do it right, because they may have no context, but from your side, you're going to do it as best as you can. And that could be setting boundaries, starting with maybe a phone call now and then and seeing how it goes, a 5-minute phone call. If it starts to get into an emotionally abusive space, I did this with someone in my life where every time they started yelling at me or whatever, I just would walk out of the room or I wasn't available. And they started to learn that every time they had a certain behavior, I was not available. You could hang up the phone. Okay, I've got to go. And they learn that they're not going to be able to do that anymore because you're not there, like that. And you can try. The other option is you can choose healthfully not to renew the relationship. It's too painful. It's too fraught. The other person is too much of a mess. They're still abusing. It's not going to be manageable for you. And both options are perfectly okay to know. I know we like healthful healing where now I can talk to my mother again. Now I can talk to the old boyfriend that beat me. Now I can talk to this woman again, like that. We want it to all be wrapped up in a nice little bow, the way they teach you in these fake Hollywood movies. It's not like that, okay? It's not going to be all tidied up at the end. However, you can certainly choose to renew that relationship, or maybe I realize I've done all this forgiveness, and you know what? I don't need to have a relationship with that person. That's okay. That's perfectly okay. And then the last thing I mentioned last week was, so you've done a really good job with forgiveness, with these steps, if you like that. And there's other ways to forgive and things, but this is one I really liked. And you can journal through it as well, which is really helpful to keep a journal when you've got some super pain that's been coming up for you over your life. And then don't be surprised if it really goes well this day or this week or this month, and the forgiveness is really working. And then you wake up one morning and you realize you have to forgive that person again. It's a process. It's a process. So I just wanted to mention that. I want to go on to the next pillar, and I'll mention these last 3 pillars. gratitude, compassion, generosity. Okay. Gratitude, compassion, and generosity. Gratitude, we've talked about a bit, and I find it's something that really lights me up. And a lot of us forget about gratitude. Like we feel it's built into our life, but are you really actively practicing it? Or is that the pillar that you'd like to kind of focus on this week or this month? There's 8 pillars, so you could take one a month, go through 8 months and really exercise, spend time where this is my month of about perspective, where I'm going to reframe things when my mind gets negative. Can I reframe it? Can I pre-frame a situation? Meaning we're going over to Uncle Harry's for Christmas or for this dinner, and they're like these people and I can't stand what they talk about, but I'm going to pre-frame. Before I go, I know what it's going to be like. I have a rough idea, and I'm going to purposely put myself in a good frame of mind and only focus on their good qualities. Pre-framing. There was somebody in my life years ago that I would visit from time to time, a relative, um, someone I had been really close with that I loved, but so negative, this person just lived in a very closed up tomb in a way, in their mind. So when I would visit, which wasn't very often because we lived far apart, I would visualize as I entered the room to the apartment that I had every light with me, the sun over my shoulder and all the lights. I would just bring in light in the room to try to brighten up. And that was the way I pre-framed the situation, was we're bringing the light in here, and it would actually help reduce the darkness a bit of the kind of doom and gloom they were, so sometimes you can even visualize something like that. And so make it a month. So gratitude, I find, is something I wake up with that starts from this first moment of consciousness. And I love to start it there, but I bring it up through the day. The first moment of consciousness, I happen to wake up in a comfortable bed, and my dear sister, some years ago when I was at Milarepa in Vermont, as you know, the winters are very cold and long. She offered me some very nice flannel sheets, and they were really good quality flannel sheets. So they're very thick and toasty, and they're on the bed all winter. And so I wake up and I'm just like a little snug. It's just a wonderful experience. And I wake up and it's comfortable and there's heat in the room, because I recall when I've been at places where there has not been heat, like Laudo, and waking up, my last retreat at Laudo in December, waking up inside the room was 34 degrees. So just, having that ambient temperature where it's comfortable to get out of bed, the heat works, there's water, there's indoor plumbing, hot shower, like so many things to be grateful for. And just the fact that I can get up and out of bed relatively healthy, there's food, shelter, clothing. I mean, there's so many things we can experience. Gratitude, and one traditional meditation that we did, I think, early on in this course, is Precious Human Rebirth, a meditation on precious or perfect human rebirth, the beginning of the Lam Rim. And it will take you through 18 situations. And the best is to take one a day, and you meditate, for instance, that you are free from being an animal. So explore, pick an animal and be for 20 minutes, try to be that animal, looking out through its eyes. What's its life like? How much control do they have over their food and being outside? And pick a wild animal, because there's more of them on the planet than domestic animals. The domestic animals are the very peak of the animal realm. And there's a vast animal realm down in the sea, and the insects, and their lives are kind of hells, frankly, if you really check. So slowly you take one of those situations. One situation is we are endowed, one of the endowments or richnesses is a Buddha existed in our world system, Shakyamuni Buddha. So imagine, spend 20 minutes imagining no Buddha. Okay, you live in a world where there's no Buddha. There would not be Thupten Norbaling. There would not be Buddhist monks or nuns. No Dharma centers, no Dharma books, no method to get you free, completely free. Nothing like that. There could be other religions. That's fine, right? If you feel they'll really permanently free you from all your mental delusions, things like that. So imagine no Buddhist tankas, no stupa in Bodh Gaya, no stupa in Kathmandu Valley, no Kopan Monastery. Wouldn't exist. So slowly you really soak your mind in that, and then the gratitude of what you do have. You come back and really feel that gratitude. Huge. So again, acceptance means not fighting reality. Gratitude is embracing reality. Okay? It means moving from counting your burdens to counting your blessings, like that. So hugely helpful, hugely helpful. There's some quotes in the Book of Joy, from a death row inmate, Anthony Ray Hinton. Okay, he was on death row for 30 years for a crime he didn't commit in Alabama, and then he was released. Then he was released from prison. Okay, and he said, one of his quotes, "People run out of the rain." He said, "I run into the rain." He didn't feel rain for years. He was always inside. There was no ability. He said, "How can anything that falls from heaven not be precious?" It's just a way of something so ordinary like rain, how your mind soaks it up in a positive way, like that. And he's like, "I'm grateful for every drop just to feel it on my face." These are things we take for granted. And people look out and they go, "Oh, it's raining today." Imagine if you never saw rain. I lived for years in California, 8 months a year, no rain. And growing up on the East Coast, like I loved the summer thunderstorms. There's nothing like the sky would get dark, the wind would come up, and then it would just come down, you know. And I remember in California in July, I'd just be sometimes like, we could just have a few drops, like, right? So there's always something to be joyful about in your, are you connecting into that, the succulence of life? Gratitude's so helpful, and it keeps the mind so buoyant. So buoyant. I mean, I have this thing, and I do it every time I take a shower in this house. Is just bathing in hot water, something I'm really attached to. So especially when it's cold outside, and after lots of time at Laudo where there's no hot shower and it's kind of an effort to get clean. And I stand in front of the shower here and I just thank my parents. You know, I'm like, thank you, thank you. Like it's so easy. Turn on. Do you ever think about that when you're in there? No, we turn on the shower. We have a shower. We never really think about it. There's so much to be grateful for. Do you ever walk into your supermarket? And I sometimes marvel at, first of all, the cleanliness. One supermarket I go is quite clean. The produce section, frankly, I just it just looks so nice. I mean, you know, they have little sprays over the lettuce. Like that's nice to keep it fresh. The way they display everything. Like, do you ever marvel at that? I remember in one time near Laudo, I was walking down back to Kathmandu and I needed toothpaste. And, you know, there's these little stores that are filthy, little, you know, hovels of stores that if they even have produce, it's not, you know. But I went into a place to get toothpaste and they had one tube of toothpaste there in the store, one tube. That's it. I mean, I think it had been on the rack for like 6 years. I mean, it was hard as a rock. And they were like, "Here, toothpaste." That's it. No choice. No, you know. So again, think about the toothpaste aisle at your local pharmacy, right? Sometimes it's overwhelming, the toothpaste aisle, honestly, but think about the choices that we have like that. So gratitude is really, and it helps us rejoice, which is an antidote to jealousy and envy. Rejoicing, you know, you're happy at the advantage somebody has. You're happy at the goodness that they're experiencing, the job they just got that they wanted, the car that they've wanted that they saved for, their new house, their good fortune in life. And you rejoice rather than like, how come they got that? Okay. The little envy, jealousy mind is very small. So you can hang out there in this very small, limited space, or you can, how great. And you can practice rejoicing if you don't feel you're a natural rejoicer. And the practice and practice and practice eventually will make you a natural rejoicer, because I was not in the beginning. Okay. So even if you are first practicing with, you hear some good thing that happened to somebody that you wanted, and initially you might be like, great. You may not really be there yet, but you're practicing it. Okay. Fair enough. Eventually you'll get there where you hear about something good and you just go, that's fantastic. I'm so happy. And it's a great space of mind. It's a really big space of mind, right? And you're not hanging on to some little clinging me, what I need. And here's another thing, check. What's on your face when you go out? Now I know we're masked up, a lot of us, okay? But even in your household, is it a positive look on your face? And I don't mean superficial, like when people would say to me when I was a teenager, if you just smiled, you'd be so pretty. Like, I couldn't stand when people said that, but you see people grimacing a lot and the face kind of turns down like they're, so do you ever think about, you know, what are people interacting? What do they see? And I noticed that years ago, I had a boyfriend in my 20s and we traveled, we both went to school for 1 year in Europe overseas. And at the holidays, we traveled together. And not only was he big and tall, but he had a scowl on his face continually. So I noticed when we were traveling together, it wasn't easy to meet people when we were traveling. Like people, I'd see people look at us and they kind of glance at him and they weren't, and I didn't really get it. And then I noticed I was alone traveling at one point, or I was with another friend, and we were meeting people all the time. People were friendly and helpful, and then I just realized he was kind of this kind of negative sense of how he was looking like that. It was interesting. So think about, I could, just turn the lips up a little bit, and we don't want to force it if we don't feel that way, but sometimes it's helpful to just think about, what's the expression on my face right now? Let's talk about compassion. Seventh pillar. We're pretty familiar with compassion. It's a huge space for Buddhism. Compassion related to bodhicitta, in the enlightened attitude is full of compassion. Bodhicitta, really the essence is, I want to get enlightened. I want to become a Buddha so I can benefit all living beings. That's the bodhicitta mindset. A lot of people mistake and say, oh, bodhicitta is about wanting to help all living beings. No, it's about wanting to get fully enlightened, because then you help living beings unlimitedly, perfectly, like that. So you do want to have that first component. And again, but it is related to compassion. It is related to cherishing others more than yourself. That's the essence of it. Okay. And so compassion, and they mention in the Book of Joy, the Hebrew word in the Bible for compassion, rachamim, comes from the root word for womb, rechem. Okay. And because the Dalai Lama often says it's from our mother's nurturing that we learn compassion. Okay. It's not that fathers aren't loving, but there's nothing like that mother love. We've talked about that before. There's nothing like that mother love. And when you have a mother that's healthy in that way, that nurtured you properly, not that every mother's perfect, but that caring for you, you learn, you feel that compassion that's there. And I remember when my mother passed, she didn't unfortunately even make it to 80. She was in her late 70s. And around the same time, a monk friend of mine, his mother died as well. And my father was still alive. His father was still alive. And he said to me, when I said to him, I'm so sorry, I heard about your mother. And he said to me, now the person, because he said, I heard your mother died as well. And he said, now the person that thought about you first in the world is gone. And it was certainly true for both of us, our experiences of our mother, where my dad was great. There's no question of all he did for us. But it was my mother that was up late at night, waking up until we came home. My father was sleeping, and he could sleep because she was the one that was up. He knew one of them would be up, like to check that everything was going okay. And always my mother was always, she'd be the one calling and checking, and did you have this, and things like that. So compassion in many ways is expanding this maternal instinct. Okay. And that maternal instinct, as we know, is so pivotal for the survival of our species. I mean, people make jokes about if men were having babies, where would we be? And I'm not dumping on men, not saying, I mean, I suppose things would have adapted, but think about it. Think about it. And I know guys that say the way they deal with their pain versus the way the women they know deal with their pain, it's very different. And the fact that women have been used to dealing with childbirth, is significant, I think, as far as women bearing hardship and tolerating, and the kindness and the compassion is huge with women. We just had a conversation. We had a Seder on Saturday night. I'm from a Jewish background. I hosted a small Seder for my my family. It was just 4 of us, my brother, his wife, my niece, very close with them. And there was a discussion about if women were ruling the world, there would be less wars. And my brother agreed. My brother said it's just this testosterone. Hormonally, guys, hunter-gatherers, were driven to protect, to provide food, where they had to kill animals. Sometimes they had to kill each other. And there's this natural tendency for a lot of guys to make war. I mean, I'm amazed at the monasteries, the young monks, the ones that have benefactors and support, which means they have a little bit more money. Somebody's buying them toys and gifts, especially the recognized Rinpoches from a young age. And what kind of toys do they want? Sometimes I've seen it with my own eyes. They want toy guns. They want toy guns. Buddhist little Rinpoches. They somehow, and there they are in the field. I entered the field one day, this house I was staying in, with a reincarnate Lama of one of my past Lamas that I was very close with. And there he is with his plastic machine gun. Right? I don't see a lot of girls playing like that. Just, now granted, it could be how we're conditioned. Girls are given dolls, but they all want, the little monks, they all want guns. So you say they weren't really taught that. Where does it come from? So something to think about. So that mother love, that it's beautiful, that experience. The warm feeling we get from helping others. Okay, there's also, from that experience, there's a release of something called oxytocin in your body, and that's the same hormone that's released by lactating mothers. So it fills you with well-being, with a true sense of well-being. It has health benefits for you, actually, when you practice compassion, due to the release of that hormone. Okay, and that hormone also has proven scientifically to reduce inflammation in your cardiovascular system. So compassion literally makes you heart healthy, heart happy. Think about it. So why don't we want to practice that? You have to check your mind, though. A compassionate response, how do you feel? This is where the practice really gets going. You practice something, you rejoice, and you take it back to your cushion, or you notice in the moment, how did it feel? Well, that felt good. So I want to do more of it. If it didn't feel good, find something else that makes you feel good. Compassion's also contagious, as we know. And I think, I don't know, please let me know if I'm repeating this story. Recently, I mentioned that I was just doing retreat in February, as you know, and then I was working a lot, this particular retreat, a lot of meditation on bodhicitta, just more than I normally was doing. And it felt really good. I just was really lit up from it in a different way than I had been before. So the retreat kind of formally ended. I'm still able to keep up a lot of morning sessions. And the other day I went to my supermarket. Was I telling you this? And it's a supermarket, the one I chose, where they're often out of stuff. It's a big supermarket, but they were often, okay. So I went into the store, and their stocking isn't so great. But I like to support them because the other store is busier, and I like to go to the store, and they're nice. But generally, when they're out of a thing and you see the empty thing there's never any salespeople I can find to ask. Nobody's around. And if I do find someone and I ask them, do you have any more of this thing? They immediately say to me, oh no, we don't have any more. They won't check, but they don't have any more. If it's not out, we don't have it. And they're kind of not interested in helping. Okay. I go into the store the other day. I ended up at 4 different places in the store where 4 things I needed were not available, not on the shelf. I could see a tag, but nothing there, out of stock. And each 4 times there was a salesperson right there, right in the aisle, right? And so I went over to them, and we all have our masks, and I went over and I just waited till they were available. Kind of, I didn't just butt in like, and then they look up at me, and a couple times, a couple of them said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Excuse me, but do you have any more of the, it looks like they're out on the shelf, but would you have any more of those?" And they came over and looked, and they all 4 of them said independently, "Let me go check." I mean, I was like, okay. And all 4 times they came back with the item. Here you go. Is this what you wanted? Amazing. I was like, so I walk out of the store and I'm walking back to my car, and it's a sunny day, and I'm walking back to my car, and all of a sudden I stopped for a moment and I was like, I think this bodhicitta stuff really works, right? So it really does work like that. I mean, it may not be 100% of the time, but I felt really happy. And then I could see behind our masks when they came back with the item, I was thanking them so much. They were happy that they could find this and help a customer. I was happy that they were so kind. I mean, it's just this contagious kind of experience of compassion that lends to so much joy in your experience. And when you see others doing something compassionate, people get moved. People really get moved like that. And you have this result, in a sense, as they mention in the Book of Joy, moral elevation, right? Moral elevation. I mean, the moral sounds a little heavy, but this feeling, it's really an aspect of joy. Scientists, they've all like talked about this ripple effect, okay, that extends out to 2 or 3 degrees of separation from you, meaning 2 to 3 different levels of people you touch, like that, this ripple effect. So again, it has an effect on the planet. Your compassionate response, your compassionate motivation, your compassionate feeling in your heart, again, that heart healthy, heart happy experience from you is going to touch other people. You've seen it. You've seen when somebody's rude to somebody and then the other person retaliates or shuts down or calls them a jerk. And you see how that doesn't feel well. Those ripples go out to whomever's around, right? Same with compassion, some positive thing. And people go, "Oh, that was nice. Like, I just happened to be observing. Not, that was nice." Okay. Now we fear compassion because we're afraid of experiencing the suffering, the vulnerability. There's a word we don't like in the United States, vulnerability. Okay. The helplessness that can come from having an open heart. So let me tell you about vulnerability. Some of you know. Those of you have read Brené Brown. Has anybody read any Brené Brown? Great. She's fantastic. She started talking about vulnerability. She has some TED Talks I recommend. I recommend her books. She's a sociologist from Texas, and she says that vulnerability, which a lot of people see as weakness, she said, no, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. You notice that vulnerable heart, the little gushy feeling of like, oh, I feel unprotected right now. So what I need to do is innovate, get creative, and figure out, what kind of changes I need to make sure I'm protected or that I'm fine, or I want to hear what the vulnerability is telling me. I want to hear what the vulnerability is telling me. There's a message in there. There's some wisdom in there. Rather than I'm weak and I'm crap no, there's some wise counsel in there. If we embrace it, if we wholeheartedly look in there. So I'm not afraid of vulnerability. Okay. And we feel that people will take advantage of us if we're overly compassionate. You're not a doormat if you're a bodhisattva. You're not a doormat. Okay. Bodhisattvas And I'll put it this way, my teachers, all of whom I believe have high realizations, they set boundaries, clear boundaries. Lama Zopa Rinpoche, if you're ever with him for extended periods of time, twice I was in a small house with him for 10 days at a time with 4 other people. He did not engage with any of us before 1 p.m. Now he would be up all night, and different ones of us would take turns if Rinpoche needed something, or right, but he didn't speak before 1 p.m. He was doing all these practices, all these things to get set up for the day when he'd be clean, clear, able to support and help whatever was going to come at that point when he decided to engage. So boundaries are healthy. So you say to an alcoholic that's close to you, a family member, and they want to come and live with you in the space, and they're still drinking, doesn't mean because you want to practice compassion that you let them drink. Okay, that's becoming an enabler and a codependent, which is not healthy, not compassionate, even though you think you are being compassionate. Because I've had people tell me, he only has 1 beer a day, but he's an alcoholic. He can't have any beers a day, because that 1 beer a day would catapult into abusive behavior and other things from their side. So don't make excuses. It's your kid who's a drug addict. This is the hardest thing, and I know some people that I've counseled that said the hardest thing was when they had to turn their daughter away or their son away from the front door. You cannot stay here anymore. I'm not giving you any more money. That's over. And we're available if you want help. We have a rehab ready to go. We will pay for you to be there if you're serious about it and you agree to sign on, but you're not staying in the house anymore. They said it was the most terrifying thing for them to set that tough love boundary. You cannot be here anymore, because it would just perpetuate the cycle. And some of the kids got it and agreed and went into a program and are okay, basically managing it now, managing the addiction. And some of them, they either never saw them or it was just continual, addiction, suffering like that. So you're not a doormat. What's also related to compassion, and I know we've only got 10 more minutes, is self-compassion. That's a whole other course. It's a whole other course. So I'm not going to go heavily into that, except that it's very important also if you want to practice compassion, which means wishing others to be free of suffering. That's the true definition of compassion. You want others to be free of suffering. You have to start with yourself, but with yourself with a broader motivation. I need to practice some compassion with myself so I can roll that into my path to enlightenment quickly so I can benefit all living beings. Okay, with that motivation. So it's not just about compassion to myself because I'm great and I want to have an easy, comfortable life. No, it's on this path to enlightenment to benefit all living beings. Let's talk about generosity. And I wanted to just do a short meditation as well, and take some questions. The last pillar, generosity. Now, there's a lot more I can say about compassion, but to go on to generosity, it's interesting. Generosity is also what we call the first perfection in the 6 perfections. The perfections are the positive behavior you're going to practice on the path to becoming a bodhisattva. It's part of the bodhicitta teachings, generosity, the 6 perfections. The reason generosity happens to be the first of the 6 perfections in traditional Buddhism is it's from which everything else flows. All the Dharma flows from that. Generosity is not just about giving money and your stuff. It's an attitude. Generosity of mind is the big generosity. So it's often something we learn to enjoy by doing it. And it's probably for this reason that charity is prescribed in every religious tradition. There's always charity. The 5 pillars of Islam, it's called zakat. In Judaism, tzedakah, okay, which literally means justice. In Hinduism and Buddhism, dana, they call it. Christianity, charity. So they all touch on this as a path of joy, a path of wholeness, I would say. And it's so important in all the world's religions because it no doubt expresses a fundamental aspect of our interdependence, our need for one another, our need for one another. You can't sit in your home unless you're connected to an electrical company that provides you an ability to have electricity to run your computer, and then an internet company to have the internet. Think about all that went into that and the improvements they make in it so the speeds are faster and faster. It's amazing. You're not just here in your own little bubble providing it all yourself, unless you're providing your own power, which is not a lot like that. Think about the water coming through your pipes that's filtered, or whatever systems where certain impurities are filtered out naturally like that. Somebody else is taking care of that in your community, in your township. Fantastic, in your city like that. So many things. The fact that you have a structurally sound house that works. Like, I mean, and the food in the markets. And so we're interbeings, as Thich Nhat Hanh says. There's an interdependence, and generosity reminds us of that. Reminds us of why they made nice roads in the United States. Why they make nice roads. Like, I think that's great, because I've been in cultures where it's all bumpy roads, dust. You're driving a little bit and you're just covered in dust. It's so unpleasant. Your car is filthy all the time like that. And then when it rains, it's muddy and you get stuck in the mud. We don't have that. I can go out. Now I notice in the Northeast, every March, all the roads are rutted from the winters, right? And then the spring and summer come in and the road crews go out and they fix the roads. They smooth out the roads. I find that incredibly kind. Unbelievable. So we're all interconnected in this way. And again, generosity was so important for our survival that reward centers of our brain light up, okay, as strongly as when we give as when we receive. Sometimes even more so when you receive, like, or even more so when you give, like that. So again, and one of those 4 fundamental brain circuits mentioned by that scientist in the beginning was generosity. And it, because it's about long-term, it contributes to long-term well-being. So I think we understand generosity for the most part. When is just really promoting a generous attitude. When we have what Lama would call small thinking. And I've heard this with people. And Rinpoche's given assignments to people. And one time it was about this stupa that we had a member of our Vajrapani community in California who passed away suddenly in 1997. And Rinpoche wanted a small stupa built for him at a neighboring center in 10 days. And we were part of this big retreat at the time. And Rinpoche assigned 2 people at the retreat that it's your job to do it. One of them was a construction guy. He said, I want you to take care of, because he had helped with the stupa at Vajrapani. And the guy looked at Rinpoche and said, but what if we can't do it in 10 days? And Rinpoche looked at him and said, that thought doesn't even exist. So we prevent ourselves from doing things with less than generous attitudes in our own minds. I can't do it. I don't think I can do that. We limit ourselves. So think about expanding that generous attitude. Okay, let me just see if there's any questions before we do this meditation. But that, in a sense, concludes the 8 pillars of joys. Again, I've taught this in longer classes. So, we could go on much more, but it's nice to have an hour to just pop in. And I'm so grateful for you being here to really think about, how can I light up my life? How can I raise the level a little bit like that with these pillars of joy? And it's nice to kind of keep working through those. Any questions, please? Yes, Barbara.
You, Venerable Amy, mentioned the 8 situations to meditate on. Where can I find them? Are they in the Book of Joy or no?
Okay, so the 8 freedoms and 10 richnesses of
8
precious
freedom
rebirth.
and 10, yes.
Okay, so that's part of the Lam Rim, and in any Lam Rim book, and I would recommend Annie Karen from Kopan Lam Rim Outlines, I think you can find online. Extended Lam Rim Outlines, they're called, are very clearly listed. So there's 8 freedoms and 10 richnesses or endowments. And those are the preliminary parts of the Lam Rim. And you can, we're free from 4 other realms, free from, there's 8 situations like that. And then there's 10, and they're somewhat related. So it's nice to kind of slowly, but any of the Lam books will take you through those as part of the early chapters on precious human rebirth.
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else before we just do this closing meditation on loving kindness?
Venerable Amy, as the Zoom host coordinator, I just wanted to let folks know in chat, I posted some options for people to make direct donations to you for your
Thank you.
contributions. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind. I appreciate that. It's really helpful because I think Mary and I were talking a little bit before the class. People don't realize that a lot of monastics are on their own. And the Western nuns sometimes have it a little rougher, I think, because people see the monk, oh, he's a monk and he's, and I've had that experience many times, but mainly they think FPMT supports us just unilaterally. They don't. There's a Sangha fund, International Mahayana Institute, which is great. You can get a maximum of 300 a month, provided you're under a certain level of financial thing. It's not enough to live on in the West, as you know, right? And, the offerings are pretty minimal from the centers like that. So I just, I think, and so basically it's helpful to let people know. And Roger once said, you need to let people know. And I said, it's very awkward, Raj, Rinpoche's attendant, because if I'm the teacher, I'm kind of like, hey, so I don't teach for money, honestly. That is not my motivation. But, just if you let people know and they go, wow, I didn't realize that there's no umbrella that's supporting you. No, I completely live on the kindness of others. Absolutely. So that's very sweet of you. So I appreciate, and there's no obligation at all. And it's very helpful for you to please support Thupten Norboling, your center, to continue to provide these teachings and these teachers and to do what they need to do, especially developing their new property, which is exciting. So that's important as well. And we as Westerners, honestly, from my traveling around the world, we don't have a great deal. We don't get it with generosity of all the cultures. The Asians get it. The Asians understand how this is going to work. Westerners, we're not a real generous, and certain countries in the world are less generous. It's amazing sometimes. I've had friends tell me stories of their thing where they made me pay for dinner and they made me, my offerings went to that. And I mean, and that's a reality, just to, people don't realize. So I'm just kind of being a little bit candid here. But I feel like for me, I don't worry about it because if I'm doing what my guru wants me to do, I can't ask for anything more than that. And every time, I don't have a lot of money, but I feel like I live really simply, and whatever I need, somehow it's provided. So I think, and again, I really believe it comes from my generous attitude. Like my mind is like, I just always am dreaming about ways to help people and give to people. And I give what I can financially when I have some money. I love to make offerings. I love to buy people gifts. I love to hold dinner parties. Like I just really enjoy, and it just comes back 100-fold. It just comes back. I never really want to worry about like that. So Mary.
Venerable Amy, I just wanted to mention that just a second, that as a monastic in the West, it is very, very difficult, and as a nun. And we are so grateful that you are teaching for us. I also wanted to mention that by making a donation to our teachers, who are pores of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, our gurus, the merit that we create is magnificent. So anyway, just wanted to thank you.
Well, thank you to Thupten Norboling for, the support and being so kind. And I'm delighted to teach for you. I love the center, and I love the air. I love being out there when I last visited and a few times I visited, and you got a great place, and this new place you've got, I'm so excited for you. And it's just going to be great. So I really am rooting for all of you. Thank you. So I'm delighted to teach. Yeah. Mary.
And I'm really grateful that you spoke about generosity, and you know, it's been a year since I've been into the Gompa and into the center here in Taos or in Santa Fe. And it would always bring me so much joy to give a physical offering to the teacher, to Geshe Sherib or Don, and or to contribute to the Dana Bowl. So I think the technology has removed that physicality of it, but with that, we have these other ways. And so I'm so glad we have this reminder, because this is another opportunity, another avenue that we can contribute and for all the things you said and what Mary already just said. So thank you.
Sure. No, absolutely. No, I appreciate it. People forget that. Like when you're in person, often there's like centers will have where they have envelopes ready and people can offer, and some centers don't do that at all. So they never teach the members about generosity. And actually generosity is the cause of your own prosperity. And we don't really, we have this saying, especially New England. Oh my goodness, when I lived there, generosity begins at home. Charity begins at home. We've all heard that, right? That's how I was raised. And so to give to others, when the first time somebody made an offering to me, I was so uncomfortable. I wanted to give it back to them. My mother taught me, she wouldn't even let me take money from my grandmother, like a $10 bill. My grandmother wanted to give me. My mother's like, no. So we learned like, it's not okay to do that. And with Buddhism, I learned now I love giving my friends money, nun friends of mine. And I'm like, if I have a little bit of money, I'm like, hey, and they accept it. And that allows me to give. So we learn, but it's very different to our Western thinking. Never would we, I remember recently, a couple years ago, my car died. I had an old car someone had given me, right? Another nun had given me because she left the country. I used it for 9 or 10 years till it broke down, till it needed $3,000 worth of repair. Is that, and these people stepped up. Several students were like, don't worry about it. We can't have you driving an old car anymore at 11 at night on the New Jersey Turnpike coming back from a teaching in the pouring rain. We can't deal with you doing that. When you told us that your lights were going on, that, they said we stressed about that. And I'm like, just used to it because I've always had old cars. So these people pulled together and they got me a used car. I don't want a new car, but like I'm in a car now. I don't have to think about it. I just drive and I can go and I know it's going to get me there. And they are so happy. They're so happy, let alone I'm happy. But they insisted. And I was like, no, 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 I'm going to deal, and they really kind of put it to me and they said, you're causing us stress. So they kind of made it like that, they were very sweet. But again, like it's very kind and we don't really realize. So we're learning as a culture what makes us happy, what makes us supported. And it's also challenging. My other nun friends say this, the Western nuns, that, the Tibetan monk will turn up and everybody's ready to empty their pockets. But often the Tibetan monk can stay at his monastery for the rest of his life. He's got a place to go. And I know Western nuns, one of them had to give up her vows because she had to go back to work and she couldn't deal with it. And that's kind of the reality. We don't have a nunnery right now in the States. And we don't, sometimes you're at a center and then the center after a while is like, well, we can't support you and, you need to go. And that's been the reality for some of my friends. So slowly we learned. So thanks for being open to that. And, but I'd love to do a closing short meditation, just very short, on loving kindness, something that's so good for you to do for yourself. It's super easy. And we'll just do this briefly. If you can just take a moment, close your eyes and find yourself in that comfortable position of the body. Just make sure the spine is somewhat extended and lightly close your eyes. Just settle your mind on the breath for a moment. And I'd like you to visualize as best as you can in the space in front of you is an exact replica of yourself facing you. And just feel there is this emanation of yourself there as you look across at yourself. Imagine for one moment that instead of it being a replica of yourself, just for a moment, superimpose a person you love the most. Just one person you love the most. And notice the feelings generating in your body and mind in relation to this person you adore. And allow those feelings to manifest as rays of light emanating from your heart, beginning to grow in your heart center, you seated here in your space. And allow those rays to radiate through your whole body over to that person you adore the most, enveloping them. Let those rays enter their heart and envelop them with this loving kindness. And slowly let that person melt back into you across from you as you see that front visualization of yourself arise, keeping the radiance going from your heart. And just observe anything that changes if it's hard to do that with yourself. But we also deserve love and kindness. And as you keep looking at that front visualization of yourself, the light rays are pouring forth from your heart towards that being. Send these wishes right now to yourself. Just think. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be free from suffering. May loving kindness manifest throughout your life. One more time, just think towards this being in front of yourself, towards yourself. You deserve this. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be free from suffering. May loving kindness manifest throughout your life. And feel all the rays of brightness penetrating that front visualization. And feel that front visualization of yourself happier and lighter, more joyful. And acknowledge them in any way you like right now before we let them dissolve back into the space. And just imagine from the edges of that visualization in front, let them dissolve from the edges into the center, into a radiant drop of light as those light rays absorb back into the center of your heart, you seated there in your space. And imagine that drop of radiant light comes to your crown, dissolving into you as you send these wishes now to yourself. Just think, just breathe in, may I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be free from suffering. May loving kindness manifest throughout my life. May any merit we have created from this meditation and all of our times in this class bring a more joyful experience of life to us, uplifting our hearts and minds, and hopefully moving us along a path to full awakening, to becoming Buddhas, so we can be of the most benefit to all living beings. Thank you. Please relax, and when you're ready, please open your eyes. And I'd like to dedicate to all those around the planet suffering from COVID and other illnesses and imbalances, body and mind, to be healed instantly. For those who've recently died, may they immediately take a good rebirth to become a Buddha and benefit all. For the great flourishing of Tutu Norbaling, and for the long lives of our precious teachers. Thank you so much. And maybe I will see you Friday. And have a look at, if you have a look at my website, I'll just put here, there's a lot more stuff getting added. So you can see the courses there if you can. Also, I think if you like me, it's easier if you follow me on Instagram now. That's a place where we are posting. My assistant sometimes posts, or I post when the course is coming up, and that because I don't have a contact list or anything like that. So that's a way if you want to know and get reminders. I think we put some stuff up there, and you can find that button on the on my website like that if it's helpful. Thank you, my dears. Please be well.